Hey, today I'm gonna make strawberry jam. It is the end of April and strawberries are coming into season, so I'm gonna make our annual batch of strawberry jam. It's super simple. I basically just follow the recipe that comes in the box of pectin. It's super simple and really tasty, so let's get started. So I'll just show you my supplies. I have this big pot here. It's big enough for me. I think I don't know, I might be able to fit like 6 jars in there, and I think that's all I need. I do wish the metal itself was thicker, but it serves its purpose. Then this here I've acquired really pretty recently. I've managed to do without for a pretty long time, but this grabs a hold of the hot jars of jam when they've finished in their water bath. I have a bowl here because I normally measure out the sugar and pour it all in one bowl, because to double the recipe calls for 14 cups of sugar, so it's nice to have it all in one place instead of frantically scooping it out into the hot fruit. My jars, I like the wide mouth pint jar. I don't know, it's just my preference. When we finish the jar of jam, we end up drinking out of it for the rest of the year. And then I just buy the, I don't even know what these are called, the ring and the lid. I just buy these separately and reuse my jars from year to year. Here's the pectin. I have 2 different brands here. It shouldn't matter too much, and the pectin is left over from last year, but the Sure-Jell is good, and the canned gel I'm sure is fine. The strawberries, generally I like to go and pick them from, a pick your own strawberry farm with friends and family, but since we're all self-isolating, I am actually fortunate enough to have a sister that owns a produce business, and they are making house deliveries right now, just dropping off at the doorstep. Unfortunately, we don't get to visit, but anyway, these are from either North Carolina or South Carolina. Whatever they don't grow, they get from the produce auctions directly from the farmers. And these are just little tiny jars, little 4-ounce jars, and if I have any jam left over that I don't have room for in my pint jars, I will put in the little 4-ounce jars and save to give as little gifts throughout the year. So I think that's it. I can't remember if the recipe, some do call for a dash of lemon juice. So if it does, we'll do that. I don't have a lemon sitting out here for you, but the jars, it's good to boil them to sterilize. Sometimes if I'm feeling lazy, which is a lot of times, I'll just run them through the dishwasher at a high heat, but I don't know if that's best practice. I've never had any issues, and I've been making jam for about 15 years. But anyway, let's get started. Okay, so I've just measured out the sugar. It's 14 cups. It looks like a lot of sugar. It is a lot of sugar. But if you don't use the exact amount of sugar that the recipe calls for, it won't set right. So it is really important to follow the directions and use exactly what they call for. Next, I'm gonna just wash my strawberries and cut the greens off, and then we'll go from there. But I did forget to tell you, you will need a second pot for simmering your fruit. And I like a big, deep pot, just because sometimes when the fruit is boiling, you actually have to bring it to a rolling boil. It'll pop, and it's really hot if it hits you, and it makes a sticky mess on the stove. So I like a big, deep pot. It kind of cuts down on some of the mess. Another little thing I wanted to mention was the flavor of a homegrown berry. It's just so much more flavorful, tangy, sweet than the berry that you're gonna find at the shelf at Walmart or even the grocery store. And that carries over into the jam. The jam is just amazing, and I mean, you can't even really compare it to Smucker's. So yeah, I think you guys will really like this. So the water you want to fill high enough to be like 2 inches over the lid of your jar. You want it to be that deep. And then to mash the strawberries and the other fruit jams that I make, I use a mashed potato masher, and it works pretty well. Sometimes, depending on how firm the fruit is, it might give you a little trouble, but this potato masher works for me. And you actually have to put some elbow grease into mashing the berries. It's kind of tough. Oh yeah, so let's get the water warming. You don't want it to boil. You don't want it to be too hot that it's gonna crack the jars when you put them in. So maybe not even a simmer, just warm. I found that if I don't warm the water first, it just takes forever for it to get to that rolling boil that you need for your water bath. So I do like to just get a little head start. So the mashed fruit, I like to mash it pretty fine because I don't like huge fruit chunks in my jam. Some people do. So I've got the fruit on a medium heat right now, and I'm going to add the pectin. So I'm adding 2 packs of pectin because I've doubled the recipe. So basically you get the fruit and the pectin and you bring it to a rolling boil. A rolling boil is when you stir that it doesn't stop boiling. It continues to boil as you stir. So it's pretty much super hot. And like I said, it will pop, and watch out because it really hurts if that hot fruit sticks to your skin. So I'm adding 2 packs of pectin, and we'll bring that to a boil. And after it comes to the rolling boil, let me actually read the recipe because, okay, so after it comes to a boil, you add the sugar, and then it'll stop boiling after you add the sugar, and you bring it back to a rolling boil and let it boil for another minute or 2. And then we will put it in the jars. Forgot my spoon. I like to use this for stirring the fruit, and then this I will use to ladle into my jars. And it does take a while. It always takes longer than I think it will for the fruit to boil and then bring it back to boil after adding the sugar. It does take a little bit of time. Let's see, I need to get a little bit of butter. So just 1/4 teaspoon of butter, just a really small amount does the trick. All right, so I'm gonna let this cook for a little while, and then we'll can it and put it in its water bath. All right, so the strawberries are at a rolling boil. That means that they continue to boil and bubble while I stir. You can see some of the foam, and I've scraped off quite a bit, and I just put it in the old measuring cup, but that's the foam that I was telling you about, that the butter's supposed to help cut down with that, but there is always just a little bit of foam, and I don't really bother with it anymore. So I'm gonna set the phone down so I can add the sugar, and we'll just move on. Okay, so I added 1 small bowl of sugar. Hopefully I can lift this other bowl of sugar here, but you kind of, as you pour the sugar in, you stir. So you're stirring and pouring at the same time. And just be careful because you don't want any of that hot jam to splash. Really does make a lot of jam. So we have about a year's worth of jam right here. So I am happy. And the 14 cups of sugar, you know, everything in moderation. You only use a spoonful of jam here and there, so I don't feel too guilty about it. All right, so here we are. This is pretty much, well, no, it's not the final product because it hasn't set. It's pretty liquidy, and I just saw a sugar clump. But so this is the jam. It's beautiful, and adding the sugar helped cut back on some of that foam that I was seeing. So it looks good. It's going to take a little while to bring it back to the rolling boil. So I'm just kind of stirring pretty steadily so that nothing burns on the bottom at a medium to medium high heat. I don't want to bring it to a boil too rapidly. So we'll get this going, and then we'll put it in the jars. Okay, so we've reached a rolling boil, and then according to the recipe, it says to boil for only 1 minute. So we're gonna boil for 1 minute. I'm gonna turn the heat back a little bit so it doesn't go crazy. And it's a little bit scary, super hot. So that's where the long spoon comes in handy. It's already jumping out at me. Have my eye on the clock there, so we'll pull it off the heat in 1 minute and put it in the jars. Okay, so again, like this jam is super hot, so be really careful, but as you ladle the jam into the jars, try not to drip it on the edges and the sides. It's kind of hard not to. Like, I just failed at that terribly. And if you do, it's nice to have a wet rag available to kind of quickly clean it off the lip, because otherwise the lid won't seal on there very well. But it's good to wipe it off with a wet rag while the jam is still pretty warm. It comes off easier. Okay, so here we are. Let's see, we made 2, 4, 6, 7 pint jars and 4 of the little 4-ounce gift jars. And that's a double batch of strawberry jam right there. And usually this will last us all year. And so when you fill the jars, try not to make a mess. If you do, just run a wet rag around the rim just to get any of the stickiness that the lid will sit on. And fill them, you can kind of see, up pretty full, so there's not a lot of air space at the top of the jar. All right, now I'm going to put the lid on, and you know, my parents always told me, I don't know if it's true or not, just to loosely apply the lid. You don't have to screw it on there as hard as you can. Water is not going to get under that lid, and then we will put that down in the water. And my water is still not warm, so I can just put my hand in there. It is warm, it's just not hot. And just make sure that it's deep enough to cover your jar by a couple of inches. So we will bring that to a boil. All right, well, here are the jars. Things are starting to get warm. I'm gonna boil it for 10 minutes and then pull it out and allow it to cool. You'll hear the lids pop as they suck down. And if you don't hear them pop, you can feel the lid, and it kind of has a slight indent, like it gets sucked down towards the jar when it seals. Okay guys, that's how I make strawberry jam. I just followed the directions that are supplied in your box of pectin. It's delicious, it's not that hard, it's great for you and your family to enjoy, it's great to give as gifts, and it's definitely something to do while we're all stuck at home. So be healthy, be safe, be happy.